man convicted of killing 24-year-old Maya Brophy Bierman will spend the rest of his life behind bars.
34-year-old Sean Mann's been ordered to serve double life sentences.
George's world is about to change forever.
Simi brothers, charged in connection with the robbery and rape of a Poinciana woman, went before a judge today in Polk County. Meantime, neighbors of Richard and Danny Cruz believe the men were living double lives as friendly suburbanites.
Desperate to save his mother's life, he agrees to a dangerous deal with his manipulative father, leading him straight into a dark past.
Yeah, the neighbors are pretty emphatic here, Jim. They were used to seeing them having regular conversations with him here in the front yard, and now they're having to absorb a double dose of sobering news. Not only that they're accused of raping a woman, dousing her with bleach, but they've also found out both these guys have done long stretches in prison before.
He survived the deadly consequences, or is the price too high to pay? Find out now! Money struggles. Hey Dad, can I borrow 50 zalazin? Mom needs kidney dialysis, and we really don't have any money. George's voice was desperate, his face etched with worry. His father's cold stare was the immediate response. Shameless of you to come here and beg us for money. His father sneered, but George wasn't backing down. I'll pay you guys back, I promise, he insisted. His mom's condition had worsened, and the mounting medical bills were overwhelming. George's father sighed, a mix of irritation and reluctant empathy. Maybe we can let her borrow the money. I mean, it's her mother that's sick. But George's mother wasn't convinced. You're still thinking about your ex-wife, George? She remarked sharply. No! I need to remind you, this is your family now! George shot back, frustration and helplessness rising in his voice. George's father sighed deeply, shaking his head. Without me, you'd have nothing. The tension in the room was palpable. The situation was more dire than anyone wanted to admit, but as the conversation continued, a shocking proposal came up, one that would change everything. Would George's family support him, or would they use the opportunity to push him into a dangerous deal? The proposition. The room was silent for a moment as George's father looked at him, his eyes narrowing in thought. George's heart raced. He had been waiting for this, but the words still hit him like a punch to the gut. His father leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. You need the money, but if you want it, his father said slowly, you're going to have to work for it. George was confused. What do you mean? His father's lips curled into a slight, almost smug grin. I've got a proposition for you. You take the money, but there's a price. I want you to do something for me. Something that will settle a score I've been waiting years to resolve. George's mind raced. What are you talking about? What kind of deal is this? His father leaned forward, locking eyes with him. You want 50 sezelzen, George. I want you to deliver something. Something valuable. And once you've done that, we'll call it even. George stood frozen, unsure if he could trust his father's words or if this would be a gamble that could ruin his life. Would he take the money, knowing the cost would be high? Or would he walk away, risking his mother's health and his family's future? The deal. George's mind raced as his father's words echoed in his head. A deal, a dangerous one, it seemed. What's the catch? George asked, his voice trembling with uncertainty. His father's grin widened, clearly enjoying the tension he'd created. The catch is simple. You get the money, but I need you to retrieve something for me. Something sensitive. It's in a place you know well, but one that's full of risk. George's pulse quickened. He knew exactly what his father meant. It wasn't just any task, it was an old grudge, a debt from the past that George had hoped would never come back to haunt him. You want me to go back there? George asked, his voice barely above a whisper. His father nodded. Yes, it's the only way. Once you bring me what I want, you'll have your money. Your mom will get the treatment she needs. But if you don't, well, you'll be on your own. The weight of the decision settled heavily on George's shoulders. The stakes were higher than he could have imagined. He knew this was a dangerous game, but with his mother's life hanging in the balance, he was running out of options. Would he risk it all for the money and his family's future? Or would he walk away, accepting the consequences? The risk. George spent the next few hours wrestling with his thoughts. His mother's health, deteriorating rapidly, weighed heavily on him. The cost of her treatment was beyond what he could handle on his own. Yet the idea of going back to that place, the place his father wanted him to revisit, was something he had sworn never to return to. It wasn't just about retrieving a physical object, it was about confronting a past he'd tried to bury. But the money, the 50,000 would save his mother, giving her a fighting chance. It was a chance he couldn't ignore. He thought about his father's words, "Without me, you'd have nothing." The truth was, George had always relied on his father in moments like this. But the idea of being tied to his father's dangerous demands left him cold. He knew this wasn't just about money. It was about power, manipulation, and an old family feud that had dragged on for too long. The night stretched on as George sat in his room, contemplating the risk. Would he go back to the past, face the ghosts that haunted him, and do what his father asked? Or would he walk away from the money and find another way to save his mother, risking his family's future and his own well-being? One thing was certain: no matter what he chose, the outcome would change everything. The confrontation the following morning, George made up his mind. He couldn't afford to waste time. His mother's life was on the line, and despite the dangerous proposition, he knew what he had to do. He walked into the kitchen, his face set with determination. His father was already sitting at the table, a cup of coffee in front of him, as if nothing had changed. "You're making a mistake," George's father said, glancing up from his paper, his voice colder than ever. "But if you're going through with it, you know what to do. And don't think I'm doing this out of charity." George clenched his fists, the weight of the deal heavy on his shoulders. "I'll get it. But after this, I'm done with you. Whatever you want, it ends here." His father's gaze hardened. "We'll see about that. You'll bring me what I need, or things won't be the same. Your mother's health might not be the only thing at risk." The air between them thickened with tension. George could feel the pull of his father's manipulative power, but he couldn't let it control him anymore. He had to do this for his mother, no matter the cost. The plan was set, and George found himself heading back to that familiar, dreaded place. The place he had hoped to forget. But this time, it was different. He wasn't the same man who had walked away years ago. He was desperate. He was determined, and he would do anything to keep his family intact. As George drove toward the location, his thoughts flashed back to the events that led him to leave that place behind. But he didn't have time to dwell on the past now. What mattered was the present, and getting out alive. The consequences. George arrived at the old warehouse, the place he had feared returning to for so long. The familiar coldness of the location wrapped around him like a suffocating blanket. He had sworn he would never step foot here again. But now, with the weight of his mother's life on his shoulders, he had no choice. His father's voice rang in his head. "Without me, you'd have nothing." The words echoed in his mind as he made his way inside, heart pounding. The building was dark and silent, save for the faint hum of old machinery in the background. George moved cautiously, every step amplified in the emptiness of the space. He knew what he was looking for, but the sense of dread was overwhelming. The object his father wanted was just one part of the deal, but George couldn't shake the feeling that there was something far more sinister at play here. As George approached the designated area, a shadow moved in the distance. Panic surged through him as he froze in place. He wasn't alone. The tension in the air thickened. George's pulse raced as the reality of the situation hit him. The deal his father had struck wasn't just about money, it was a trap. And now, it was too late to back out. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed through the warehouse, growing louder with every passing second. He had crossed a line that he couldn't uncross. The consequences of his actions were now set in motion. Would George make it out of this alive? Or would he pay the ultimate price for his desperation to save his mother? What would you do if your family's life was on the line? Would you risk it all for a chance to save them, even if it meant facing your darkest fears? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to hit subscribe for more gripping stories. Don't miss our next video. The neighbor everyone trusted was hiding a dark secret. coming soon.